everyone. I'd like to welcome you to today's B2B Lead Roundtable podcast. This is Brian Carroll, and I'm pleased to have Dave Brock with us today. If you don't know Dave already, Dave is the author of the Sales Manager's Survival Guide, and also CEO of Partners in Excellence. And Dave and I had a lively conversation while we were out in the DC area, and I really enjoyed his perspective and viewpoint learning from him. And so I wanted to bring his thinking to you. And Dave, welcome. Can you tell us a little bit about your background?
Well, Brian, thanks so much. I really appreciate the chance to kind of continue the conversation we started in Washington, and look forward to appreciate you inviting me to this. Just, by background, I actually started out as a physicist in my career and ended up going to the dark side of selling and sold mainframe computers for IBM a number of years, went up the food chain, went to EVP of sales or CEO of a number of technology companies, and now run the consulting company. And we really help our clients really solve some of the most difficult problems in sales and marketing and dealing with the new buyers that there are. And so we have kind of a collaborative approach in helping really outstanding people solve really, really difficult problems.
Well, I'd love to hear your perspective. What right now do you feel is the biggest trend you see affecting your work and sellers today?
Well, clearly it's the convergence of a number of things that we see in the marketplace. It's the new buyer. It's everybody's changing the way they buy and learning how we engage these new buyers, both through marketing, sales, and customer experience, is critical. At the same time, we see tremendous transformations in business and business models, whether it's the digital transformation that virtually every business is undertaking, or just kind of old business models being displaced with new business models. We have some of the classics of Airbnb kind of turning the hotel and lodging business upside down, Uber turning the taxi and limo business upside down. So we see that the new business models occurring, driving real stress on customers. And then the final thing is just overwhelming complexity, just between the rate of change, the amount of information we're deluged with every day. So, most of the people I'm meeting are really struggling with at least one of those three things, and I see it really impacting virtually everybody.
Well, I can relate to those challenges, and I think just talking about complexity for sellers and marketers, I was having a conversation with someone earlier, and it's just overwhelming the amount of tools an average salesperson uses or a marketer uses. And it also creates challenges around collaboration, that internal collaboration. And I wanted to ask, how do you get internal collaboration working to address these problems, these challenges, and help improve sales performance?
Yeah, I think, the easy answer is break down the silos and start talking to each other. It's easier said than done. And the thing that we see is a lot of the issues we face in terms of internal complexity and internal collaboration is just people being well-intended, doing their jobs, but somehow their jobs aren't aligned with each other, or there are things about their jobs that cause them to be in conflict with other people. So things like, simple things like aligning roles and responsibilities, aligning metrics, some classic kind of value stream types of analysis. I just had a conversation earlier today with a marketing executive and his top management team, and we were talking about what's the value proposition they create for sales, since sales is kind of the downstream customer of theirs. And so I think, again, we have to kind of rethink our working relationship, rethink, classic kind of business process reengineering of our workflows, our roles and responsibilities and really get some alignment in metrics so that we realize we're all on the same team with the same end goal.
What's the role of sales enablement to help achieve this?
Well, and I think on the wrong side of some debates on this. I mean, I look at sales enablement as more a set of processes and a set of activities than I do a function within the organization. And also, so if you look at what sales enablement processes are supposed to do, is they're supposed to be able to help maximize the salesperson's ability to perform. And so you look at that and say there are a whole collection of things that that we can do to do that. The first is, the frontline sales manager and their role in coaching and developing everybody on their team to perform at maximum capability. But then these frontline sales managers need a lot of support in a lot of areas, whether it's tools and technology, whether it's new programs, whether it's people selection and performance management, whether it's training, whether it's content or so on. So you start looking at saying all these things contribute to enabling the salesperson to perform at the highest levels possible. Now, who does those things could be all over the place. It could be marketing that's doing some of these things. It could be HR that's working on a lot of the talent management types of things. It could be sales operations, or it could be people in the sales function. So I think that the discussion around sales enablement is more powerful when we look at what are the things that we need to do, and then look at who in the organization can do those most effectively and most efficiently.
I like how you talk about it, because when I talk about enablement, I often am looking at marketing and sales. But as you're talking, it's, bringing in the finance team, the human resources team. So it's a collective effort, not just one single group or department. And that's the whole point you were saying earlier about bringing down the silos. And am I understanding that correctly?
Exactly. And I think, I got engaged in a debate not long ago about, how sales enablement earns a spot at the CEO's table. And to me, that was one of the most ridiculous debates I've ever seen is, we now have sales enablement executives that, not only want to have a spot at the chief sales officer's table, but now they believe they should have a spot at the CEO's table. And CEO's table is getting pretty crowded with a lot of people who want a spot there. And I think it gets away from the point of what we're trying to do. And I think it actually starts building more barriers to collaboration and working. We're building, to the degree that we're building another silo and another set of functions competing for attention and corporate resources. Again, I tend to like to look at these as more processes and workflows and what are the things that need to be done. And then we look at who can do those most effectively. And if it is a sales enablement organization, well, that's really powerful, but we shouldn't overlook the other parts of the organization.
We spend time talking about sales enablement, and marketing does have a really important role in helping raise the level of performance for the sales team. And as you and I were in DC, we talked about, often marketing is looked to as the leads people. And we need to think more beyond that in terms of how they can impact efficiency and effectiveness of each person. So how do you think marketing can help raise the level of performance of sales?
I think that, one is, I think we have to change our mindset from kind of marketing being the awareness people, the create interest people, the leads people, the demand gen people, and so on and so forth, and look at the entire customer buying journey and look at what that is and who can contribute to that. So, that marketing kind of, we have the traditional feeling that, marketing does demand gen and lead gen and tosses those over the wall to sales. and sales immediately rejects all of them as being bad and tosses them back. But we separate these processes, and I think modern sales and modern marketing is very different. I like to look at modern marketing and sales as kind of like a basketball team. On a basketball team, every person has their defined roles. So you have a couple of guards, you have a couple of forwards, you have a center, and you practice plays, and everybody tries and plays those roles. And you get really expert at that. But then in the game, you're very agile and nimble, and adapt to what's happening with competition and what's happening with the game. I think we need to look at marketing and sales more like a basketball team. What are our roles? What are responsibilities? What are the plays that we execute? Who executes those? But I think we have to be very agile in working with each other and saying, who's the person that should be taking the shot right now? Who's the person that should be bringing the ball down the court? So I look at marketing and sales as not kind of a sequential process where marketing gets the leads and gives them to sales, and sales takes care of everything throughout. But we work together, in the demand gen process, and we work together in the buying process. There's a huge amount marketing can bring to the party with qualified opportunities, whether it's case studies, whether it's proofs, whether it's tools, whether it's content relevant to where the person is in, towards the end of the buying journey, and those kinds of things. So we really need to look at it as an interleaved and integrated set of processes.
It makes a lot of sense what you're talking about. And I think the challenge is that marketing and sales often are doing the same things. They might have different words for it. And for example, marketing may call it lead generation, or inbound sales might call it prospecting, social selling, etc. They're doing the same things. And, as I've talked to salespeople, they often are feeling they're succeeding despite marketing, not because of it, or they're caring. I was talking to a rep who was trying to, build his own pipeline. He was getting leads from marketing that weren't helping, and he was prospecting, trying to figure out how to cold call, etc. And I just wanted to ask, let's talk about how salespeople are prospecting today. And do you think we're getting it wrong? How should we be thinking about the customer first impression, and why?
Well, I do think we're getting a lot wrong about prospecting. One is, I don't think enough salespeople are prospecting. Most everybody I talk to is opportunity starved, but we have a lot of these kinds of mindsets and mentalities that say, well, it's marketing's job to get those leads, and if they aren't getting the leads, then there's nothing I can do. Or it's the SDR's role to take those leads and qualify them or do something with them, and then my job is just to take those great leads that the SDR gives to me. And so I think the first thing we do is we have to change salespeople's mentalities and say, marketing is going to do everything they can to get you the right kind of leads and the right kinds of opportunities. SDRs are going to do everything they can, but if the volume isn't sufficient, you have to go out and start finding business yourself. You have to prospect. You have to generate new business. And you might go to marketing and ask them for help in doing that, maybe giving you a specific program that you can execute as well. The other thing, too, is I sometimes think we get our prospecting models, and particularly kind of the SDR-driven type models, a little bit backwards, and I think we do a disservice to SDRs. Most organizations, the SDR is kind of an entry-level job to selling, and they do something that most salespeople would refuse to do, which is to call people they've never spoken to before and prospect them, and it's a really tough job. But one of the disconnects we have is these poor SDRs often calling on C-level people. I get SDRs calling me every day, and I feel really sorry for them because they'll call me and say, "We believe we can help you improve your business." And I say, "Cool. What am I doing wrong? How should I be improving my business?" And they're floored. They don't know how to carry on that conversation, and they shouldn't be expected to. If they're brand new to selling, why are they calling me, a C-level executive, albeit of a small company, but a C-level of executive? We're matching the wrong people up with the target audience, and as a result, we're creating terrible first impressions. If somebody calls me and they can't have that a powerful, engaging first conversation, I'm going to have a negative impression both of that individual and of their company. So I think we're missing huge amounts of opportunities by not having the right people. I wrote an article about a year ago saying maybe we need to get some of our most talented senior level salespeople being SDRs. If they're creating that first impression, and if our target persona is the C-level person, then those are the people that have the best capability of creating a very, very positive first impression and opening up far more opportunities than a brand new SDR without that experience base.
I love that suggestion. And it reminds me, before it was called an SDR, that's what I started at 23. I was on the phone and I was calling C-level people, 23 years old. There was very little training, advice, coaching. It was on the job. Later, I started a company helping people do that. And I worked for a company that myself, I was CEO. I made calls with the team who was on the phone. And the whole point is to learn, to see what they were experiencing, to understand. And I think what you're talking about, and this is really a great transition into talking about this idea of empathy. That's the hard part, is how can someone who doesn't have experience connect with someone else and understand their perspective and feeling. And so I wanted to ask you, how can sellers be more empathy-based with their approach to customers?
I think there are a number of things. First of all, and what empathy is about is caring. Yes. You got to really care about your customers, whoever those customers are. If you're only in business to say, how can I get an order? You're never going to be successful. And all. So you got to care about your customers. You've got to care about their success in achieving their goals. If you're driven by that, it changes your whole orientation and your process for engaging the customer in the conversations you have. Now, I'm not. That shouldn't be kind of a do-good or Pollyanna-ish kind of mentality. Is the only people I'm going to engage are people who I know have the problems that I can solve. So I'm not wasting my time calling on people, engaging them and caring about them and their success if they don't have the problems that I can help them solve. So it is very focused on calling the right people that we can do some things with. And then it's understanding who they are. It's kind of sitting behind their desk or being able to walk in their shoes. And there are a whole number of ways you can do that. I used to joke I used to sell to the large money center banks in New York City, and to learn about banking, you hang out where the bankers hung out, and they hung out at Harry's at Hanover Square. And I'd learn a lot by just talking to them over a beer about what their businesses were, what their dreams were, where their problems were, which enabled me to connect much more effectively with those people in business. And so here we got to start hanging out where our customers hang out, whether it's discussion groups, whether it's trade shows, whether it's really learning about where they live and what they worry about every day. It's asking questions. It's getting engaged in those conversations. So I think, kind of along with caring is curiosity. If you have kind of those two attributes, you're going to figure out what the customer is about. You're going to figure out how to engage the customer. You're going to figure out how your products and solutions might serve the customer and help them. So I almost started at two fundamental attributes, caring and curiosity.
That is terrific. I really liked how you brought it together in terms of needing those elements, then immersing yourself in the world of your customer, going where they are. And, it's interesting as I was listening to you, I don't know that the marketers who are reaching out or making that initial impression have actually been able to get in the world of the people they're hoping to influence and help to drive change, to work with them through their journey. So I would say that what you shared, you did as a salesperson, we need to do that in marketing too, get in the world of the customer and observe. And from that, we're going to have the empathy, or to put it another way, we'll have the intuition. Our empathy is our marketing and sales intuition to know how to best move forward and what some of those opportunities are.
It's really funny how some of these cycles go, but I remember, maybe 10, 15 years ago when there were a lot of initiatives around voice of the customer and understanding voice of the customer. And when you looked at the way a lot of those initiatives were implemented is marketers would go out and live with the customers, in the sense that some of them literally would live for several weeks with the customers and go to sit and observe them in their job and all. But, getting marketers out and treating the customers less as an intellectual exercise or an analytic exercise, but getting them out and actually visiting the customers, spending a few days, watching them work, talking to them about what they care, not about what we sell and whether they like these things that we sell, but talking to them about what they do and what they feel and how they think, and then bringing that back in and say, now we know the customer and we've seen where they live. How do we take that information and best leverage it to engage them where they're at?
Fantastic. And we had time just for a few more questions. I was just going to ask you, do you have any other actionable advice around this for those who want to either help improve sales enablement or their sales team's ability to ultimately improve their own performance?
I think, it's a little bit counterintuitive, and it may sound simplistic, but we don't do it, is so many of our initiatives, so many of our thinking is driven kind of inward out rather than outward in. We have our products and we have our services, and we think about what we want to do and how we want to bring those to market. And so we develop all our launch programs, all our marketing programs, all our sales program from an internally based orientation about what's most effective and what's most efficient for us. And usually when we execute those, we find we've missed one thing, is we've forgotten about the customer in that whole thing. And what we do that may be most effective and efficient for us may not be effective or efficient for the customer. So generally, I find the fastest way to the best and most effective solution is to always start with the customer and work your way back in. Who are they? Where are they? How do they work? What drives them? What do they care about? What are their dreams? And then how do they, when they get into buying motions, how do they buy? How do they self-educate? How do they learn about things? And trace those things back in to design the process that meets them where they're at, rather than trying to force them to find us and meet us where we're at.
Well, Dave, thank you so much. What's the best way for our readers and listeners to get in touch with you or to find out more about your work and get access to other resources?
Thanks for asking that. They could follow me at my blog. It's partnersinexcellenceblog.com, and I publish virtually every business day. And I tend to try and have a provocative point of view. I'm very active on LinkedIn. People can reach out and follow some of my content on LinkedIn, or reach out and connect with me, or connect with me over Twitter, David A. Brock.
Thank you again, Dave, for being with us today. For our listeners, we're going to have all these links for you, including the link back to Dave's site on the B2B Lead blog. And check back for additional updates. And we thank you all for listening. I hope you found this helpful. Dave, I always learn when I speak with you, and I know our readers did too. Thanks again.
Thanks so much, Brian. It's a real privilege.